happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
In the news this week at the Justice Department.
So-called Justice Department.
At a ceremony there, the Attorney General William Barr was rebuked for anti-gay bigotry.
It was quite a moment. I only wish I'd been there.
I wish he had been there.
And yet another murder of a black trans woman, this time in Kansas City. B.B. Hill shot to death, the 21st murder of a trans woman of color in the U.S. this year.
A high school theater teacher was fired for being lesbian. A theater teacher. Now, it was a Christian school. We'll explain.
Yes. And we mourn the death of John Giorno, legendary poet, artist, AIDS activist, a real New York figure at age 82.
And the father of Pride in Chicago has died at the age of 70, Richard Pfeiffer.
We told you a couple of years ago about a gay man who'd been beaten by 4 police officers on Staten Island. He has now been awarded $1.75 million in damages from New York City.
Another city in Mississippi is protecting LGBT rights.
And same-sex marriage and abortion have just been legalized in Northern Ireland.
Just like that.
Boom.
I'm going to review Harvey Fierstein as Bella Abzug.
And we're going to close our show with a very special interview that Andy did this week with 3 of the cast members of The Inheritance, which is the new 2-part play that was a huge hit in London and is sort of the follow-on to Angels in America, I would say.
It's its own thing, but it is a 2-part play. It's the gayest thing on Broadway, and we're going to be joined there by Samuel H. Levine, Carson McCalley, and Jordan Barbour.
Okay.
Okay.
But we start, as we have for the last 3 years, with the hideous president. Now, I have an observation or two. First of all, we have been saying since this guy took office, well, it's a good thing we haven't had an international crisis.
Yes.
Because God knows what would happen. Well, he has just created it.
He's turned the Middle East over to the Russians and inexplicably to Iran and to, it's insane, and defending it.
But this is what we have all been on the edge of our seats hoping would not happen, but in fact has happened.
There was nobody to stop him.
It is just hideous. And here's my question. We're talking about him being impeached for obstruction of justice or whatever line. Why are we not impeaching this guy for treason?
Well, treason is a very specific term when you are at war and you betray your country.
Well,
he's betraying our allies.
He's betraying our country,
yes,
and has
no
for
question.
3 years now.
Well, it's the one thing that's gotten Republicans upset at him is this, but what are they doing about it? Why aren't they taking back power and saying, okay, we're not doing this?
Well, has Mitch McConnell turned now that the president has lied about him?
Oh, God, it's all completely scary. As if we didn't know before, we got confirmation that everybody who watches Fox News is on board and completely forever. And how do you break through all that? You watch Gay USA. We welcome all.
But there was a little sign of the resistance last week. We're very, very proud of Judy and
Dennis Shepard.
Dennis Shepard, the parents of Matthew Shepard,
yes,
murdered all those years ago
20.
in Wyoming. They were going to be honored at a ceremony at the Department of Justice in commemoration of the passage of the James Byrd and Matthew Shepard hate crimes law.
That's correct.
But they were not able or chose not to attend, but they sent a letter.
And they called on the Attorney General, William Barr, quote, to disavow and condemn any person who fuels the fires of hate with their words and actions, Anybody you have in mind,
Yes.
including yourself and the president?
They specifically referenced it.
And they cited the Supreme Court cases that were just heard, where the Justice Department was on the other side against LGBT rights.
They also praised career employees at the Department of Justice for the work they do on a daily basis to try to keep the legal system intact. And it was a very strong letter. It's amazing that anyone was allowed to even read it at the Department of Justice. But when their representative finished reading it, it got a huge ovation from the audience of career Department of Justice employees.
The Attorney General sent a statement saying hate crimes are reprehensible, but he didn't give any examples.
Well, justice is just not prevailing in the Trump administration.
No.
We don't have to tell you that. But there's a new report from the Center for American Progress about the Department of Education.
Yeah.
And what they found is that with the Secretary Betsy DeVos rescinding regulations and guidelines and her whole approach to life, there have been only 1/9 the number of prosecutions of harassment and bullying and crimes against people for their sexual orientation or gender identity as there were in the Obama administration. It has just almost completely disappeared.
Well, thank God for the Southern District of New York, where they're going after Giuliani and that crowd, and that may lead to other things. But Congress tried to go after, the House rather, tried to go after Ben Carson for his transphobic comments this week at a hearing, and he's not sorry at all. He just railed against political correctness.
Well, he claimed that his cracks about big hairy men going into women's rooms in shelters, homeless shelters, was not about trans women. Well, they're not transgender women. Well, what are you talking about? Because he was talking about rules making them allowed to be there, so everyone said, well, he's talking about trans women who are who he doesn't consider women, but it was very confusing.
By the way, speaking of all those Supreme Court cases that we've talked about, the 3 that went before the court a couple of weeks ago, a poll found that 57% of you out there support ruling in our favor, and only 34% oppose. I don't know if that will have any. Ann isn't optimistic, but on those cases. Now,
I'd like to be.
2 cases were denied review by the Supreme Court this week that relate to us. In one, a biological dad in New York was contesting joint custody with his same-sex partner, whose sister was the surrogate. They did not hear that case. And the other, a mom who was outraged that her trans child was excluded from transition-related decisions for her trans child, who had run away from her. The court basically said, on the substance, we're not ruling on that. And besides, the child's 18, it's moot, emancipated.
Other things going on in D.C. The Congress is arguing over the next defense authorization bill, the next budget, and the House included a provision that would protect trans military service members.
Calling it the Harry Truman Amendment.
Because he integrated the armed services racially. But the Senate, of course, under control of the Republicans, does not want to go along with this. And so it's in conference, and they have to come up with some solution. And people are very upset at the Senate Democrats for not finding a way to hold firm for inclusion in this.
Jack Reed from Rhode Island is sort of heading up that, and he says, no, we're working on it, but they have a sense that it's not a priority.
Go ahead. On a more personal note, our very popular bisexual representative, Katie Hill, a Democrat of California, who won in a very conservative district in California, is now in trouble because the Republicans have found a nude photo of her with another woman to she's married. She's in the middle of divorcing her husband. The rumor is the 3 of them were involved, but this is a campaign aide who's in the picture with her. Now, that's not illegal to have an affair with have an involvement with a campaign aide, but this is, and the thought is that the husband actually posted this originally, and the Republicans are spreading it around. Maybe not technically, but the idea is in a conservative district.
If Justin Trudeau can survive blackface on multiple occasions.
Not to mention the governor of Virginia.
Right.
I don't know, though. Do women get punished more?
We'll see.
We will see.
I mean, after Trump and grab him by the bum, I don't know.
Is there a double standard
I do not know
for
anymore.
bisexual women?
I do not know anymore.
Well, we may find out next year.
By the way, the U.S. Supreme Court also overruled the decision in Michigan to stop those partisan gerrymandering there. And the only hope we have now is with state courts in getting fair lines.
All right.
And what about politics? I mean,
Buttigieg surging.
The Iowa poll has Mayor Pete up 7 points. So you got Biden at 18%, Warren at 17%, and Buttigieg at 13%. He seems to be becoming the moderate alternative, the gay candidate.
Well, but it's very episodic around the country. Then you have the story from South Carolina where he's getting no support because in a state with a large population of black voters, particularly, I guess, older black voters, there is some resistance.
And he got in trouble this week for making sort of comments about African-American homophobia instead of talking about...
Oh, did he?
Yeah, apparently.
That's, oh my God, it's so ignorant.
It is ignorant, but people get desperate out there on the campaign trail.
I guess so.
All right, wake me when it's over. I will vote for whoever is running against Trump.
Well, that's why I'm not getting deeply into all that yet.
Right. Okay.
Bring on Sherrod Brown. And Stacey Abrams. That's my ticket. The two of them in any order.
That would be nice.
It would be delightful.
Okay, but you got to be in it to win it.
Yes, you do. All right. Well, sad news out of Kansas City.
Yes.
Trans woman Brianna B.B. Hill, 30 years old, shot dead. Just the latest in a long
Well, the
line.
21st documented murder of a trans woman
I
of
always
color.
believe
The second in Kansas City.
I believe there are a lot more we don't hear
They
about.
arrested somebody at the scene, but no motive has been released. And back in Dallas, the man who assaulted trans woman Malaysia Booker a month before she was murdered, this was a group beating in a public square that was videotaped, he was sentenced to 300 days for that assault.
Yeah. In Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, a waitress at Fat Joe's Bar and Grill has been fired because she asked politely not to be required to serve a very transphobic couple at a table.
There was an older couple who said, pointed to some trans people, said, "That's disgusting, don't you agree?" And the owner said, "You serve them or you go home."
And she went home.
Well, I would think she might have a case for discrimination.
I don't know.
We'll see.
Well, and do we think there is a case for the teacher fired from the Christian school? This is Palm Bay, Florida.
Yes.
Lesbian teacher Monica Toro Lisiandro.
She's fired for being a lesbian. She's leading a show that she was directing in the Lurch, but they interrogated her about whether she was in a relationship with a woman, had been to Pride, and had hosted an LGBT group in her studio. 3 strikes and you're out. Play. She said the kids deserve better. I think the thing that, look, she could survive being gay if they had protections on the basis of sexual orientation. Hosting the gay group could get you in trouble at a Christian school. I think you should host it off campus now for those kids, wherever you turn to.
That would be nice.
She'd been a teacher there for 3 years. She was well liked.
I have another job possibility for her. Not too far away in Jacksonville, Florida, a little farther up the coast, Duval County. The clerks there, ever since same-sex marriage was legalized, have refused to do any weddings. No weddings. We're not performing them. We'll hand out the marriage licenses. We're not performing any weddings.
God doesn't want that.
Well, there is an entrepreneur next door who's taking advantage of this.
And he says God does want it.
Pizza shop owner has opened a quickie wedding chapel for everybody, welcoming everybody right next to the county clerk's office. So you can get married right away after you get your license, and get a pizza, and maybe the teacher, Monica, should go work there.
You're still doing good news in Mississippi. Holly Springs became the 4th city in the state to enact protections on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Mississippi.
Now, is that legal given the state law that says you can discriminate for religious reasons?
I don't think there's state law. There are a couple of states that have that law excluding you from protecting.
Yes.
But I don't think, we'll check, but I don't think Mississippi is one of them.
But presumably.
Tennessee, Arkansas, but you do have a license to discriminate in Mississippi if you cite your religion.
Yes, in spite of this new law, the state law allowing you to discriminate for religious reasons.
Holly Springs is the city that won't hate.
Unfortunately, in Pickens County, Georgia, they've had a conundrum there. They had passed a very progressive pro-trans school bathroom law. You can use the bathroom of your gender, your lived gender.
Based on a decision from the 11th Circuit, which is sort of saying to schools, this is what you have to do.
Right. However, having issued those guidelines or adopted that policy, the school district started receiving death threats, harassment, vandalism, and so they have repealed those guidelines. And they've said, all right, we have some single-use stalls or restrooms, and the trans students are going to have to use those because we cannot put up with this violence.
See you in court. On Staten Island, so we told you about and mentioned it, the gay man who was beaten by cops. The cops were called to the home by the mother because this guy was fighting with his brother in 2015, and he said he was showered with anti-gay insults from the cops. There is a video of the incident, no sound, but it proved so it didn't prove a hate crime.
It was taken by someone across the street, a neighbor across the street, who showed the 4 cops beating. I think we showed it on this show.
He had a severe spinal injury and had to be treated for that. Louis Falcone did. So the jury awarded him $1.75 million from the city of New York.
And Sevier County, Tennessee, a big dust up there. County Commissioner Warren Hurst, at a commission meeting, the monthly meeting, started railing against any number of things that were wrong with the world.
So he said at the hearing, we got a queer running for president. If that ain't about as ugly as you can get. He also spoke up for white male rights. Some applause from the audience. The city.
I want to ask these guys, what rights do they think they have lost? It's not about rights they've lost. It's that they can no longer scream about everyone else with impunity.
They don't want to share.
Bill Maher is screaming about this.
Exactly. We had it so easy for so long.
Yeah, we could say anything we wanted about anybody.
No talent of our own, and we were running everything. We didn't have to work very hard.
Yep.
Look, I'm grossly exaggerating here, but that's the basic psychology here.
Yep.
So the city responded by calling his remarks disturbing. Tennessee Equality Project is calling for his resignation.
Dollywood disavowed his remarks because, of course, this is the home of Dollywood.
There is a censure vote set for November 18th. That should be something.
That's the next monthly meeting.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Interest. Oh. This should have been higher up in political news. We have buried the lead.
All right.
New survey from the Williams Institute. 21% of LGBT people in this country are not registered to vote.
The reason I didn't write that down is because 24% of the total adult population is not registered to vote.
I read 17%.
Well, we're reading different sources. You know what it is like on the internet. But
I believe it was in the same report.
Everybody should be registered. Everybody should vote all the time. But you have to admit, in many places, there's not much to vote for, and that's why people don't.
I certainly agree with that, but we would sincerely appreciate it if people would register.
When you don't vote, you give us more power.
That's true.
Because we vote all the time. We go into these Soviet ballots in New York where the Democrats and Republicans endorse the same judges.
Hey, we get to early vote next week.
I know, across the street.
For a few referenda.
Yes, we do. I haven't figured it out.
I think it's yes on everything.
A friend from council member, well, I shouldn't say, said vote yes, yes.
In Salt Lake, Utah, the Mormon Church is changing its mind. It now opposes banning conversion therapy for minors. At first it said it wouldn't oppose the ban. Now it has decided, yes, it will oppose the ban. What else is new? Maybe we should talk to Mitt Romney.
Should we do a couple of the obits that we have?
Yes.
Well, we'll start with John Giorno. We have a picture of, this guy goes way back. He was 82 years old, so he goes back to, we have a picture of him with William Burroughs from the Beat Generation.
Yeah.
There he is.
John Giorno on the right, William Burroughs on the left.
He hung out with, he was a poet, he was a perforance artist. We're going to get to his AIDS activism, but he was in the Warhol crowd. He was lovers with Andy Warhol.
And Robert Rauschenberg.
And Jasper Johns. How's that for name dropping?
Why? That sounds more incestuous than lesbian communities of the 70s.
No.
That is, there he is in the famous, he was the guy in the Warhol film Sleep.
A 5.5 movie of him.
5.5 hour movie.
5.5 hour movie of him sleeping.
He was a beautiful, beautiful man. And
Spiro Agnew called him
a legend. There he is with his husband, Ugo Rodinone, who survives him, both fabulous artists.
But anyway, he was during the war, during the Vietnam War. He and Abby Hoffman did a broadcast to the soldiers for Radio Hanoi. So Spiro Agnew called them Hanoi Hannahs. What else? He toured rock clubs with William Burroughs, doing poetry slams, and he was the founder of the Treatment Action Project and AIDS Treatment Project in '84.
He was an avant-garde hero in downtown New York for decades, and it's really sad to have him gone.
He is. And then in Chicago, Richard Pfeiffer, he died a couple of weeks ago at the age of 70. He's the guy who coordinated Chicago's Pride March through this year, right from the beginning. He was inducted into the do you have a picture? Can you put his picture up, Richard Pfeiffer? He was inducted into the Chicago LGBT Hall of Fame in 1993. Active in many groups, the Chicago Gay Alliance, Gay Horizons, Gay Speakers Bureau, and as a gay advisor to 3 mayors. He is survived by his husband, Tim Fry.
And we also mourn the death of a great ally, Elijah Cummings, the congressman from Baltimore. He was on our side always, forever.
I mean, it took him a while to come around on same-sex marriage, but when he did, he was a great advocate in Maryland when they had the referendum, and because he was the son of 2 Pentecostal ministers, I think.
Look, all these civil rights leaders have been our best friends for many, many years.
And he fought the First Amendment Defense Act in the Congress very, very, very successfully. And what else? I mean, he was a civil rights hero.
He was. And married Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski.
That's right, 68 years old. Okay, international news?
Yes.
Well, if Saudi Arabia is trying to promote tourism these days, but you might want to think about it again. The police arrested a gay 23-year-old for posing this picture of himself in shorts at a local beach. Now,
it is a provocative photo.
Oh, come on! It's a picture of a guy. It's a picture of a guy in shorts, and you're not allowed.
It's a picture of a guy's rear end.
You're not allowed. It's covered, and you're not allowed to wear shorts in Saudi Arabia. Period. This guy has 170,000 Twitter followers
because he posts pictures like that.
Well, but he says, you want all this tourism, but you won't give us freedoms. He encourages tourists to stay away. The new law that was just passed in September bans shorts. Women have to cover their shoulders and knees. Don't drink on the way over, because you have any alcohol on your breath on getting off the plane, you'll be put in prison. And if you're transgender, forget it. Drug offenses are punishable by death.
Okay, but have we buried the lead in Northern Ireland? Same-sex marriage is now legalized.
As are abortion rights.
And it won't start till the beginning of the year, January, because whatever. But this is because their government fell apart 3 years ago.
Yes.
And they haven't been able to put it back together. So
They tried to stop this, but they couldn't do it.
they failed. So finally, all of the United Kingdom
Right.
has legal same-sex
And
marriage.
going to the Commonwealth, we told you Justin Trudeau was reelected with a minority government, but he's still in power. But in New Zealand, Jacinda...
Wait, I like the fact that he has to put together a government
Yes.
with liberal,
That's right.
more progressive
Yes.
parties. Usually they have to make deals with conservative
That
parties.
is correct. But in New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, who we like, progressive prime minister, she's not ready for banning conversion therapy. She's worried about religious freedom for some, but she says, we're going to work it out. I care about these kids, and we'll see. We'll be watching.
We will. In Hong Kong, a court has rejected a lawsuit by a lesbian for marriage rights, recommending that the government review the situation. But same-sex couples are now recognized for purposes of taxation, government benefits, visas. So there is some rights there, but not full marriage rights.
In the Bahamas, which was flattened by the last hurricane, the Christian Council there is concerning itself with planning massive resistance to Pride, which is not until October 2020, but they're going to start demonstrating against it now. How about rebuilding the country?
I was thinking of something else, so I missed the story you did before then. Was it Reading, England, and
I haven't
Chick-fil-A?
done it. No, I haven't done it.
Chick-fil-A opened its first store in England, in Reading, and was met with huge protests, and so they're going to close the store.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
In Jamaica, the government made a ruling in favor of the Montego Bay Pride, and then it was overturned by a court of appeal. So they're still it's still in flux there.
Yeah,
big
we
fight.
thought we'd won that one, but it's still going along.
Poland is considering a bill to criminalize sex education, promoting or approving the undertaking by a minor of sexual intercourse or other sexual activity. 3 years in prison for you if you do.
World Pride going to Sydney in 2023.
Her Majesty the Queen talked about discrimination based on sexual orientation for the first time in her life during the Queen's speech.
Better late than never.
This is from
what did she say?
This is for. It was just something about, my government opposes discrimination based on race and gender and sexual orientation. She had never said the words.
Okay.
Let's see. Australia's going to. Did you say Australia's going to host World Pride?
Yeah, they said this is going to be. They have it every few years. They had it here, obviously, in New York this year. So 4 years from now, it's going to be in Sydney, coinciding with the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras. They're celebrating it because they say it makes a difference. The difference it made is it exposed what a horrendous piece of garbage this whole corporate enterprise is.
And their theme is fearless. In France,
Good luck with that.
In France, the lower house voted to broaden access to in vitro fertilization for same-sex couples and single parents. Sounds like nothing, but it's a big deal over there. And in Australia, we told you about that horrible Anglican bishop from Sydney. Well, all the other dioceses are saying, come to us, we love gay people.
Yeah, it turns out he's sort of an outlier.
Yeah.
All right.
Entertainment?
Yes, unless you have any AIDS news.
No, I do
which
not.
I don't. All right, so we will move on to entertainment.
Okay.
Do you want to tell us about Bella Bella?
Yeah, I love this show with Harvey Fierstein as Bella Abzug. He wrote it for a woman. But then the women that he wanted, they couldn't get, and somebody said, "Why don't you do it?" And it has the blessing of Bella's daughter, Liz Abzug, who's an out lesbian. And look, it was very politically sophisticated. It's all about the night in 1976 when this congresswoman, anti-war activist, feminist activist, lost to Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
Oh God, it was so
by 1%.
horrible.
And it gets it very politically sophisticated. It gets into how she was screwed out of that seat by the New York Times, by the Democratic Party itself, which didn't want this. It would have been so wonderful to have her as our U.S. Senator. But Harvey was terrific and not campy, doesn't get up and drag. It was very inspiring, and I think it's very much for our times. The audience loved it. I loved it. It's on until December 1st at the City Center.
I started watching this show on Starz, Leavenworth, about this army guy who was accused of ordering the murder of some Afghanis, just off the top of his head in Afghanistan, and is now in Leavenworth. It's sort of controversial. In the middle of the first episode, they said, and by the way, he's gay.
Oh.
And he came out to his parents, and they weren't too thrilled about it because he's from a, evangelical family in the Midwest or something. So,
are you meant to feel sympathy for this person?
I don't know. I've only seen the first episode.
Okay, we'll see. The new season of The Crown is coming up, and Prince Charles is going to be played by Josh O'Connor, who made such a splash in the gay-themed God's Own Country as a farm boy. Now he's going to play a royal. He played a very rough type in that thing, and now he's going to play Prince Charles as a young man.
I went to a screening this morning of a film that's going to be in the Doc NYC Film Festival, the New York City Documentary Festival, which is on November 6th to 15th. Chock full of about 300 documentaries. If you're as much of a documentary fan as I am, you're going to want to take a look at this. You can go to docnyc.net to get the full schedule. The one I saw today is called The Pickup Game, and it's about a whole industry that is sort of underground about teaching men how to fairly violently pick up women. I ended up feeling sorry for the guys who are paying to learn this because the point is they're all pretty ineffectual.
Are they like incel types?
Yes, but the teachers are predators and horror.
They're serious about this?
Yes. Deadly serious, and the teachers end up being rapists and just money grubbers.
Guys,
and it's horrible.
Take it easy.
Well, at the beginning of the movie, I was thinking, man, any woman who saw this would be a lesbian immediately.
Well, if you want to see an awful man, go to see Tracy Letts' Linda Vista. It's not about Linda Vista, the person, the place in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is played by Ian Barford. Tracy Letts wrote it. He's a misanthrope. He can't stand prosperity, sabotages anything good in his life, especially with women, in a really awful way. But he's also smart and funny. It's a little bit like a sitcom at the start, but it builds to an exploration of some serious issues. And as I said, more sex than The Inheritance. It's a good ensemble.
Yeah.
Tracy Letts is a little long, but Linda Vista.
Okay, and there's something coming up on PBS next week on Monday, the 28th, on the Independent Lens series, Made in Boise. It's about, it turns out that Boise, Idaho has become a center for surrogate mothers who are producing children for a lot of same-sex couples and single men. And there's a woman there who started an agency, and now 75% of her clients are same-sex couples from other countries. It's a factory there.
Because they don't allow it in a lot of countries.
Exactly. Well, they don't allow it. Have they passed the bill in New York?
Nope. This is Brad Hoylman's bill, our state senator.
Yeah.
And a lot of the National Organization for Women is against it because they think it disadvantages and exploits these women.
Well, maybe watching Made in Boise will educate them a little. This is, as I say, airing Monday the 28th. It's also going to be available online. But this is something, not this particular place, but this is something that people like Elton John and Andy Cohen and Neil Patrick Harris and Ricky Martin have taken advantage of.
Neil Patrick Harris had a terrible accident on his vacation. Did you see?
No.
No, he fell on something and smashed into his hand, and he's all infected, and he's I was on vacation overseas, and now he's back home getting fixed up. But It was serious.
That sounds serious. And in the news, Miley Cyrus. Oh, my God.
I don't follow Miley Cyrus a lot. She says she's a member of the LGBTQ community.
Pansexual.
She does. But she had such bad experiences with men. I think she went after her former boyfriend, Hemsworth.
Oh, please.
But now she says she's met a good guy, so you don't have to be gay anymore, basically, which is a terrible thing to say.
Terrible thing to say. Please. Could we just put some lid on at what age people have to be before they're allowed to to speak publicly?
She's trying to backtrack it. Yeah. Okay, we're now...
All right, so let's instead turn to our brilliant interview. Your guest, Andy, interviewing 3 actors from the new, about-to-be-a-hit Broadway play, The Inheritance.
The Inheritance was a play commissioned by the Hartford stage to Matthew Lopez, the playwright, and they thought it was too big, and they passed it on to Stephen Daldry, the great director who did Billy Elliot and The Crown and so many other things. He brought it to the Young Vic and off the West End Theater. It went to the West End. It was a huge hit. It won 4 Olivier Awards, and now it's on Broadway, and we are joined by 3 of the cast members. Sam Levine, who plays Adam and Leo, 2 roles. You all play 2 roles. Carson McCalley, who plays a young man, part of a group of friends, and young Henry Wilcox. And Jordan Barbour, who plays also a young man, part of the friends, and Tristan. Yes. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we have an audience of LGBT people, non-LGBT people all over the country who are probably heard something about this play. What do you want them to know about it in order to come see you?
Who's going first?
You know, I guess the endeavor of this play, which is to try and bridge the story of generations of gay people, specifically gay men, seems like it's a really specific story and seems like it's about something that is that might seem esoteric to a lot of people, but it's actually a universally human story. And what's so beautiful about it is the way that Matthew wrote these characters so specifically and yet so universally that like really anyone, I think, can see themselves in these characters. And the fact that he wrote such a wide array of characters and gave them so many different lives, I think really speaks to where we are as a country, where we are at this moment as a country. And this idea of bridging generations is something that's bigger than just the gay story. What's so great about this show, though, is that Matthew really does try to address the fact that we lost a generation to the AIDS epidemic. And I can say this speaking as a gay man, there is something that I have felt bereft of pretty much my entire life, which is this older generation of gay men sharing their stories with us because we lost so many of them to this disease. And what Matthew, I think, is brilliantly doing with this play is trying to bridge that gap and start a conversation between different generations of gay men.
And the beautiful thing about what you're saying too is that in my life I feel like it's not just a loss of stories from older generations to me, but as a queer person, I feel like I can't share my stories with older generations that don't understand me. It's hard to share with, older generations of people who don't have my experience, like my grandparents and stuff like that. And so this gives me and a lot of queer young people an opportunity to have an outlet to share their stories with older queer people that they don't ever get that experience elsewhere.
Yeah, it very much opens the door. I also love the way that the play is structured, how it's this group of young men and kind of strangers and people coming together to tell a story, which is also a really beautiful thing, and it's people working together to create something. So it's on this meta level. It's amazing to get to watch, I think, people create something together and work together in a common purpose and common goal.
Yes, your 2 characters are part of a group of friends that stick together basically through the whole show. Why do you think your characters want to be in this group that you're in?
Yeah, well, it's hard because as a unit, we have characters that we pop in and out of throughout the entire show. But as the people sort of telling the story, something that we have a unique position to have is that we're sort of characterless a lot of the show. You know, I don't have to be sitting around saying, why does my character want to be talking to Jordan's character right now? Because when we're telling the show, when we're telling the story as narrators, we sort of don't have characters in a way. We're sort of just people telling stories together.
Yeah, it's us. It's very much, I think Matthew Lopez, the playwright, talks a lot about how we all have stories, and it's all these people just coming together, and it just so happens we tell this particular story, but every single person has such a complex history and complex story, and it could be any one of theirs. So we kind of just find ourselves coming together.
But you play two characters who are sort of outsiders who want to get into this circle. Yes?
That's true. But coming from, we're all in the circle together.
Okay.
And kind of, we need those characters to kind of, as a catalyst for the story that we're telling to get it going. But
I would also add, so there's sort of like two circles. There's one sort of like meta-theatrical circle, which is like all these young men characters that are doing this collective storytelling. And then this group of friends that sort of starts the story going with their brunch scene is like a group of gay men around the city that come together and just sort of hang out and have brunch together. So that aspect of things, like there is a sort of like group of friends that we've seen before, like we've seen that sort of idea before. But the new thing that Matthew's doing is this collective storytelling idea, which is sort of what Carson was getting at, which is this idea that we are all sort of just in this world and telling this story together.
Okay, we haven't even mentioned the fact that Matthew was inspired by Howard's End by E.M. Forster.
That's right.
And also the movie with Emma Thompson. I think that's how he was introduced to it, and then he fell in love with the book. I love the movie. They just made a miniseries about it.
That's right.
And this is a two-part play, and it's probably going to need to be a miniseries when it gets on. It is two plays, actually. Almost from the get-go, you have Morgan,
right.
Who is E.M. Forster, helping you tell the story.
That's right.
Well, what's that like?
It's incredible. The man who plays Morgan, called Paul Hilton,
It's amazing.
when he steps on stage, it's like it's E.M. Forster, and he's there, and we've summoned him to help us tell our story, and it's just incredible to get to be with this author and this another generational thing, this older gay man, to help us tell our story.
And in one way or another, a lot of your characters are related to people in the Howard's End story.
That's right.
I was able to follow it somewhat when I saw it in London, but it's not important that you have seen Howard's End to see this play. Maybe even better.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real reclamation, I think. You know, it obviously takes inspiration from Howard's End, but it's its own piece completely, and feels
even though your name is Henry.
Right.
They do,
Young Henry.
Yeah.
And it's John Benjamin Hickey playing him as an older man, a wealthy conservative.
That's right.
Which introduces something. Part of and also Henry Wilcox is another outsider. How does Henry see this group?
Yeah, it's interesting because my role as young Henry, as the sort of memory of Henry, is very different, I think, from the role that John plays in his later years, and I think I can't really speak to the person he becomes because I'm really focused on the person he is when he's really young, which is very free and sort of just sort of focused on the love of his partner at the time.
Like Ebenezer Scrooge when he's young.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's cool because you
powerful.
see the seedlings of what he's going to become in your performance and in the way it's written, and that sort of. I think what's interesting is you use the word outsider, which is. I don't want to give too much away about what happens in our story, but like the idea of this character versus his partner.
Right.
His partner is really trying to immerse himself in this community, and it's in the 80s. It's around the time when AIDS was really a huge thing happening in New York, and it was a new thing happening in New York. And you have one character sort of trying to distance himself from that world, and you have another character, his partner, trying to immerse himself in it and really trying to make a difference.
Right. You do flashbacks, but most of it is set within the last few years, right?
Yes.
That's right.
Right?
That's
The majority
right.
of it.
2015 spanning to 2017.
And it's partly about the lasting impact of AIDS and how
Very much so.
a lot of people out there, not people who watch this show, but AIDS is over, we got the pills now, blah, 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 blah. But there it is, front and center in this play.
Well, my character
Tristan.
is the HIV positive character, one of 2 HIV positive characters in the show. And what's important to me and what was important to Matthew is showing the world of people that are still living with AIDS. It's certainly not what it was. It's not the death sentence that it was. And, the idea, though, that it's, oh, well, there are pills now and it's over, it's really important to us to make sure that it's not seen as something that's over, but it's not necessarily something that's the death sentence that it was. And so I think what Matthew does really interestingly is give you 2 characters that are HIV positive, one of whom is not taking any sort of medication. He's discovering that he's HIV positive and he's getting sick. And another character that is a physician. He's been living with HIV for the past 11 years. And we see this completely well-adjusted man who's able to talk pretty candidly about his life as an HIV positive man. Yeah. And we can finally get to see it as something that does not have to be this weird sort of thing that's to the side that we can't talk about. No, it's actually HIV, AIDS is something that is a part of our culture. It is a part of our society. And the many ways in which we deal with it are handled quite well in our show, in that it is not the terrifying behemoth that it was in the 80s, but it's also not something that's a thing of the past. It's something that's still very much alive right now.
Yeah.
And
and also just the generational trauma that it's caused and dealing with that as well. And the people that were lost and the people that are still dying today and dealing with those feelings and those stories.
Of course, now you have to worry about the explosion of STIs, sexually transmitted infections, which we reported on last week. I couldn't believe it. They said it's not just gay men, it's a lot of people, because there is this, and people are getting tested more too, which is good.
Which is fantastic.
Which is a good thing. Go back a little bit. Now, you played it in London. You did not, but and now it is where it's set.
Yeah.
So what does that feel like, being in New York with the play about New York versus London, let's say?
It feels just so right. It feels like it's home. It feels like we're relating to the audience in a different way. I grew up in the city, and it's taken on this new levels of emotion and connection, and it feels amazing to be doing it where it should be.
Well, without giving anything away, I don't see how you could make the end of part 1 any more emotional.
Right. Right. But being here, it becomes more emotional because you just see yourself.
It also it fills in so many gaps where you don't have to teach the audience what things mean, or
they just know.
In the big ways, but also in the tiny ways. When you mention 11 Madison Park, or when you mention these tiny things, the
rent control department,
the rent control department.
There's so much about real estate in this show that I wasn't in London, so I don't know what the reception was, but you can hear anytime someone talks about a character gets a key to Gramercy Park in our show, and there's a reaction. A character gets a rent control department on the Upper West Side, and there's a reaction.
Or moves to Hell's Kitchen, and all of these things teach the audience a little bit more about the characters in a way that the London audience probably couldn't.
Very much. It's also like this play, for this moment in time, it challenges, what's it mean to be an American? And Americans understand that in a different way than English audiences, and they take it more personally, and I think they're thinking about what's our responsibility to our country, to our nation, to our people, to our history, and how do we move forward?
Jordan, you even have a line about Trump and HIV. Maybe I shouldn't give it away.
Well, I don't have we are never allowed to say Trump, actually, in our show.
Yeah, we don't
that
mention
is by
his name.
design.
Yeah.
We try not to talk about him here, but...
Well, we talk about him quite a bit, but
we talk about him a lot.
saying
We just don't say his
name.
name. But I feel like if I talked about it, it would give it away. But there is a whole discussion about anatomy and disease.
All right, but all right. So what are your audiences like here? Who's coming? And what are they saying to you? Is it all ages? Is it all races? Is it all men and women? What's going on? Who's coming to the show? And what are they saying to you?
I know that the production team is doing a lot of work to diversify the audiences of race and age and gender, and and also income. And we're trying to get everyone to see this show, and not just the classical Broadway audience of a kind of older, upper class dynamic.
And tourists.
But I don't know that the tourists have latched on to this quite. I mean, I think we just started a couple weeks ago. And,
It's true.
You know, in my experience, at least, typically in the previews period, it's New Yorkers that are coming to see it, people in the tri-state area that are coming. As far as like the demographics that are seeing, you know, it's Broadway. It's expensive to see tickets to see a show. So you're typically getting affluent, white. I would say for our audience, it's predominantly men. But that's not to say that we're not getting a diversity of audiences. I mean, every time I look out there, I see a wide array of people. And I also think that, like, as Sam was saying, we're doing a lot of outreach to try and get, you know, Tom Curtihy, one of our producers, just gave us a speech the other day. He's like, we are really trying to make sure that we get as many different people who will be affected by this show and by the story that we're telling into the theater.
He gave us a whole list of, you know, sort of organizations we're reaching out to, and
it's incredible.
Tom Curtihy's on a roll. He's in Hadestown too on the Broadway now.
And more so, he believes in the power of this play, and he instills that in us. And it's amazing.
What's interesting about the power of the play too is that, like, I think that gay people will come see the show, and we want them to come see the show, and it's amazing to talk to gay people and queer people about the show. But what's been so surprising to me is coming out of the theater and talking to people at the stage door who aren't in the queer community, and how much it affects them. A lot of times because they have sort of a Henry Wilcox track where they lived through the 80s and they never spoke about the epidemic. They had the privilege of being able to ignore it. And because they were straight and they were white, and they could just sort of look away.
It was like living in two worlds. The war zone and everybody else.
And so that's what's been so crazy about the people coming to see the show and talking to them after the show is them realizing their own past and their relationship to the things in the show.
This is also it's a very frankly sexual show.
Yes.
You know, in many ways.
And sexy.
Yes.
It's a sexy show.
And we'll put a picture up. And no, seriously, it is. And hell, why not? Why all of Broadway is? I mean, in many ways. I mean, God. But so my question is, I mean, you know, do young people come? I mean, this is going to be tough to do in high schools, probably. I mean, they have controversies over, you know, the Matthew Shepard play.
Right. Yeah, I think young people are coming, and they see, it's sexy and it's fast and it's like it's quick paced, and they're talking about Instagram and social media and all these things that are really great that we can latch onto. And it's also, Matthew has talked about also, he was, as a gay man, so afraid of sex. And so this is also a kind of reclaiming of, yes, we get to be sexy, and he gets to be sexy and be proud of that. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of like reclaiming is so prevalent in so much of the show. And like, you know, you brought up E.M. Forster being a character before. One of the arc that I love with regard to E.M. Forster is the fact that Matthew is both paying reverence to E.M. Forster, but also really having a conversation with him. There's a really amazing moment that happens toward the end of the first play where one of the characters confronts him about the fact that Morris, his gay novel, took 56 years for him between the time it was written and the time it was published.
It was his gay novel.
Yeah, it was his gay novel.
He died before.
And he died before.
Christopher Isherwood had to.
If he, you know, was not that long after Oscar Wilde was put away for buggery. So,
so it's a really, there's again that sort of intergenerational thing that's happening. Is a really interesting aspect of our show, and the idea of like sort of reclaiming space and sort of redefining what that space is. And so the whole conversation, part of what I love about the sex that's happening in our play is that it is quite frank and that it is quite explicit and honest. And, you know, for a long time, gay people had to be ashamed of the type of sex that we were having. And, you know, the whole idea of being in the closet was to hide that aspect of who we are. And one of our characters also says in the second play that one of the reasons why people didn't want to confront the epidemic is because they didn't want to think about the ways that men were contracting it.
Yeah. Oh,
and
sure.
That is it's such a, to have a 7-hour play where we're talking
Puts
about
it out there.
a lot, and frankly, through the whole thing.
A very prominent TV host of a national show at the time, who became good on AIDS, but in the initial round said, "I'm not having no bum effer on my show."
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a guy who eventually made up for it. We're coming to the end of our time.
Okay.
I don't want you to get away without saying, what's it like working with Stephen Daldry?
Oh, man.
Amazing.
Where do you
Yeah.
start?
He's a genius.
A genius.
Well, yes. As I said, he's doing The Crown on TV right now.
He
but
is
he did Billy
incredible.
Elliot, the movie, and then the musical.
He's incredible.
What is it?
That he's human. And what I love about Stephen actually is, so I'm a huge fan of The Hours. I love The Reader. I love Billy Elliot. I love The Crown. I mean, I am a fan of his work. And I walked into the room, a little bit intimidated and afraid. And he's so fun and goofy and silly, and like he creates an atmosphere that is both serious and silly at the same time. And so you always want to work. You always want to bring your best self to the room. Not because you're intimidated or scared, but because you know that you're going to contribute as much to this vision that Stephen has, and that Stephen's figuring out.
Yeah.
That's what's so exciting
He's the
about it.
first
Is that
one to
he's
say, "I don't
actively
know."
Exactly. He's actively figuring it out with us. And for me, that's what makes a theater director a brilliant director, is someone who's able to walk into a room and be like, well, I have an idea of what this is, but I don't know if it's going to work, and the reason why I cast you guys is because I saw some level of expertise in that audition, and I want to bring that out, and I want us to create a group that's going to make this story what it is.
And not only I don't know, but I was wrong. He has every right to be like, I'm right all the time, because he's genius.
Yes.
But so often he will contradict himself. Weeks later he'll be like, what I told you 2 weeks ago was wrong. You are right. Or it's just so beautiful to have a director that is so humbled and down to earth and human.
I also think I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think it's important to also talk about our co-director, Justin Martin.
Yeah. Yes.
And he is such an integral part of, the two of them together are a unit. I mean, I kind of feel like the two of them together are Stephen Daldry, and in a way that has that is so amazing to watch, because you see them both together and they feed off each other's energy. There are times when Stephen's not there and it's just Justin working with us, and you don't feel like you've lost anything. We don't feel like we're not getting this Stephen experience. The two of them have made this amazing energy that infects everyone around them, and makes such a space where you want to be creative and want to spread the joy of making this show.
We have to get you to rehearsal. So Sam, something else you want to add before we go?
We're putting it all out there, so come see it and see what we've got.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Inheritance. It is. You can go to theinheritanceplay.com and read all about it, and it's going to be running until.
Open-ended. We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know.
Thanks for watching.